The Force is old and full of shadows.
The Death Star corridor smells of recycled air and ozone, and, beneath both of those, something older. Something Obi-Wan Kenobi has stopped pretending he cannot identify. It smells like the end of things. He walks. The hangar stretches behind him, the Millennium Falcon. A boy who has already flown his whole life without knowing what he was flying toward. A princess who has already survived more than anyone should survive at her age. They are, all three of them, going to be fine. He has made certain of that. The choice ahead is not a sacrifice born of desperation. It is a calculation, made over 19 years of desert silence, that has finally resolved to its answer. Darth Vader waits at the far end of the corridor. Even at this distance, the black armor carries weight. Not just physical mass, but accumulated significance, the way a wound carries the shape of the blade that made it. Obi-Wan knew this man before the armor. He loved this man before the armor. That knowledge does not leave him. It settles somewhere below his sternum and stays there, quiet and absolute, as he raises his lightsaber. The blade hums. Blue-white, old light. They have been through this before. Different doorways, different stakes, different versions of themselves. Mustafar, the volcanic shore. The moment when Obi-Wan made the choice he would spend 2 decades second-guessing. He does not second-guess it now. There are no more decades. Only this hallway, and what comes at the end of it. Vader speaks. The voice behind the respirator, deep and processed and utterly without the warmth that once lived inside it, says something that Obi-Wan feels more than hears. He doesn't move. Because moving is not the point. Winning is not the point. Luke needs a few more seconds, and Obi-Wan Kenobi has spent 20 years becoming exactly the kind of man who can give Luke Skywalker a few more seconds. He lowers his blade. He smiles. The saber comes down. Then, nothing. Not darkness. Not light. Not the Force afterlife he had quietly hoped for. The warm dissolution into something larger. Just the specific absence of everything. The way a room feels after the last person has left it. Not empty, exactly, but finished. He rests in it. He does not know how long. The room of 1,000 fountains does not have 1,000 fountains. It has perhaps 24 small water features arranged across several levels of cultivated greenery. The air kept perpetually 10 degrees cooler than the rest of the temple by some architectural trick of the Republic's original builders. Obi-Wan Kenobi used to come here as a Padawan when Master Qui-Gon was being particularly cryptic, and the rest of the temple felt like a maze. He has not been here in years. He is here now because he has been awake for approximately 30 seconds, and he needed to walk somewhere before he screamed. His hands are wrong. That is the first thing he notices, the hands of a 57-year-old man given back to a 38-year-old body, and his muscles do not know what to do with the discrepancy. He is too strong. His joints do not ache the way he has grown accustomed to them aching. The hair at his temples, when he found a reflective surface in the corridor 30 seconds ago, is auburn again, not the gray-white of the desert hermit. The beard is shorter. The face is younger, more capable of surprise, less capable of hiding it. He reaches the edge of a fountain pool and sits on the stone lip. He breathes. The Force is here. Of course the Force is here. It is the temple. It breathes Force the way the lower levels breathe exhaust fumes, but it feels different now, the way a familiar piece of music feels different when you hear it again after losing someone connected to it. He had 20 years to learn to feel the Force as a vast, still thing. Here, now, it is alive and immediate and full of people he knows. He can feel Anakin in it. 2 floors up, probably, training or pretending to train. He can feel the younglings in the far wing. He can feel the council members, the knights, the Padawans, all of them moving through their days with no knowledge that in 3 months the temple will be burning, and most of them will be dead. Obi-Wan Kenobi presses both hands flat against the stone of the fountain ledge. He does not scream. He made a decision, sometime in the nothing between the Death Star corridor and this stone seat, about who he was going to be for the duration of whatever time he has been given. Screaming is not consistent with that decision. He thinks instead. The process is familiar. He has always thought in clean, transactional lists when everything else is falling apart. It was his Padawan coping mechanism, and apparently it survives death. Small mercies. What he knows. Order 66 is coming. He has approximately 3 months. The trigger is Palpatine, specifically the private command signal transmitted through the clone behavioral chips. The inhibitor architecture that every Republic physician in this building would laugh at him for suggesting exists. No one in 19BB knows about the chips. No one except Obi-Wan, who is technically from 0BB and died last Tuesday, or possibly several decades ago depending on how one counts. What he has: one body, one lightsaber. One identity that still commands the automatic respect of the military chain of command, and 20 years of experience grieving the outcome he is now trying to prevent. What he needs: Cody first, then Anakin, then somehow, everyone else. The water moves in the fountain pool. The light through the temple's high windows is early morning amber, the kind of light that makes everything look like a painting of itself. A Padawan passes through the far end of the room, young, human, maybe 13, and gives Obi-Wan a small bow that Obi-Wan returns on instinct, the muscle memory of the last 38 years proving more durable than whatever the last 19 layered over it. He watches the Padawan leave. There is a grief operating in him at a frequency below thought. He is aware of it the way one is aware of a sound that has been present so long it has stopped registering as sound. In the other lifetime, he had 19 years to metabolize what was coming. Here, he has arrived 3 months before it happens, in a body that has not yet experienced it. And the grief is all there and none of it processed, and it sits behind his eyes like pressure behind a sealed door. He does not open the door. Not here. Not now. He stands. His knees do not ache when he does it. That is going to take some getting used to. The room of 1,000 fountains is behind him. Ahead the temple corridors, the same stone, the same hum of temple life. The same morning light, everything exactly as it was, which means everything's still intact, which means he still has time. He has never in his life been more aware of what time is worth. He sets off toward the barracks where Commander Cody's unit is currently billeted between campaigns, moving with the unhurried deliberation of a man who has already made his first decision and is simply in the process of executing it. The other choices: Anakin, the Council, Bail Organa, the architecture of a counter-conspiracy that will need to function quietly for 3 months inside an institution that does not know it is being saved. All of that comes after. First, Cody, the man who, in another life, gave the order that sent a gunship strafing run into the canyon wall where Obi-Wan had just fallen. The man who did it because a chip in his brainstem told him to and left no room for the 20 years of trust to operate. The man who had spent those 20 years earning the right to be the first person Obi-Wan Kenobi tells the truth to. He rounds the corner. He breathes. He does not look like a man carrying the weight of a dead future. He looks like the negotiator, the title the separatists gave him, the title his men use with pride, the title that means this is the Jedi who finds another way. He wears it now with full knowledge of what it costs, what it requires, and what it is for. There is another way. He is going to find it. The hall is narrow and seldom used. 3 alcoves carved into the stone on either side, each fitted with a low bench and a single oil lamp that burns without smoke. Some temple architect's small kindness to the knights who needed to think without being watched. Obi-Wan had chosen it for exactly that reason. He had found Cody in the barracks. He had said 4 words. "I need a moment." Cody had read something in his face, not alarm. Obi-Wan had been careful about alarm. But something sufficiently unusual that the commander had followed him here, without asking questions, which was one of the things that had always made Cody invaluable. Now they sit across from each other in the narrow hall, the oil lamp between them throwing even light across the commander's scarred jaw. And Obi-Wan says, "I need you to hear something that is going to sound, at first, completely insane." Cody's expression does not change. "General, I'm going to ask you to trust me through the insane part, and hold your questions until I've finished. After that, ask everything. I'll answer every question you have. But I need the full account to land first before we start picking at pieces of it. A beat." Cody's eyes move across his face with the same tactical efficiency he applies to a terrain map. "Go ahead, sir." So Obi-Wan tells him. Not all of it. Not yet. The architecture of the counterplan is still forming and presenting half-built plans to men like Cody invites half-built objections, but the essential skeleton, the inhibitor chips, the command signal, the name Order 66, which Cody has never heard and which lands on him with the visible force of a physical blow that he absorbs through sheer discipline, going very still the way a structure goes still in a high wind. The outcome. What happens to the Jedi? What happens to the clones who execute the Order? The ones who spend the rest of their shortened lives carrying the weight of what the chip made them do? He does not tell Cody about the Death Star corridor. Some truths require a foundation before they can be placed. When he finishes, the lamp burns. The hall is quiet. Cody says, "You're asking me to believe there's a device in my brain that can override everything I am." "Yes, and you know this how." Obi-Wan meets his eyes. "I can't answer that yet. I need you to let that be the one question that waits." The silence that follows is the longest 30 seconds Obi-Wan has spent in either of his lifetimes. He watches Cody process it, the careful, methodical deconstruction of a man who has spent years making life or death assessments in seconds, now applying that same machinery to the most disorienting intelligence briefing he has ever received. Then Cody says, "What do you need from me?" The breath Obi-Wan releases is quiet, controlled, first, to let me remove it. He finds Anakin between sessions. The training salle on the 4th level is empty at this hour except for Anakin, who is running sequences alone. Not the formal gem-so patterns his lightsaber form favors, but something looser, more instinctive, the movement of a man burning off energy that has nowhere else to go. He doesn't hear Obi-Wan come in. Or he does, and pretends not to, which has always been the more likely explanation. Obi-Wan leans against the doorframe and watches. The thing about Anakin Skywalker, the thing that no portrait or legend or the long weight of grief ever quite captured, is how alive he is. Not powerful, though he is that, the force practically audible around him when he moves, but alive in the specific way that certain people are. Like they generate more reality than the space around them can comfortably hold. For 19 years Obi-Wan carried the memory of this aliveness as a kind of indictment. Here, watching the real thing move through the training salle in the morning light, the feeling is more complicated than that, more human. Anakin stops, deactivates his saber, turns. "You're staring." "I'm observing," Obi-Wan says. "There's a philosophical distinction. You have your talking face on." Anakin crosses the salle toward him, reading him with the same precision that always unnerved the Council and never unnerved Obi-Wan, who had grown up under that particular scrutiny. "What happened?" Not a question. Anakin rarely actually asks. Obi-Wan pushes off the doorframe. "Walk with me." The parapet looks east over Coruscant's upper city, the traffic lanes layered into the sky like sediment, the Senate dome visible in the middle distance catching the day's first hard light. They stand at the railing side by side. This is where Obi-Wan had decided to do it. Open air, witnesses impossible, but visible horizon in every direction, which matters for what he is about to say. "Anakin," he begins. "I know about Padme. The stillness that takes Anakin is total. It is the stillness of a man who has been running for a long time and has just been told the exit is blocked. I've known," Obi-Wan continues, before Anakin can decide whether to deny it, "for some time, longer than I've let on." He keeps his eyes on the Senate dome. "I want to say something about that. Something I should have said earlier, and didn't. Because I was a coward about it and because the Order's orthodoxy felt more manageable than the conversation. So I'm saying it now." He turns to look at Anakin directly. "I'm glad. That's all. I'm glad you have her, and I'm glad she has you, and I am sorry, genuinely and specifically sorry, that you have been carrying this alone because you believed I would treat it as a transgression." Anakin's jaw works. The calculation happening behind his eyes is visible and layered. This is a man trying to identify the angle. The catch. The moment the approval curdles into a lesson about the living force or Jedi responsibility. He has been conditioned to expect the catch. The absence of it is, Obi-Wan can see, more disorienting than anger would have been. "You're not." Anakin stops. Tries again. The Council is not part of this conversation. Obi-Wan holds his gaze. This is a conversation between brothers. Anakin, that's what I should have been to you in this, and I wasn't. That's the thing I'm correcting. The morning light sits on the parapet. A transport somewhere below them makes the low-frequency sound transports make. Anakin looks at him for a long time with the particular expression of someone recalibrating something fundamental. He says, quietly, she's pregnant. The knowledge hits Obi-Wan in the chest like a closed fist, even though he already knows. He has always known. The twins are the twin stars around which the rest of the tragedy originally orbited. He keeps his face open, receptive, present in the way that matters. How far along? He asks. 3, maybe 4 months. We don't. Anakin exhales. We don't know what we're going to do. You're going to be a father, Obi-Wan says, simply, whatever else happens, that's what's true. And you are going to be extraordinary at it. The certainty in his voice is not performed. He has seen what Anakin Skywalker becomes when the fear of loss is weaponized against him. He has also seen, in the brief impossible window before Mustafar, what Anakin Skywalker is capable of when he is loved without conditions. The man standing at this railing is still entirely that second version. The door has not closed yet. Anakin's throat moves. Something behind his eyes, the perpetual exhausting vigilance, goes briefly quiet. There are things coming, Obi-Wan says. Things I need to tell you. Not all of it today, but soon. And I'm going to need you, Anakin. Not the chosen one. Not the general. You. Specifically. Do you understand? Anakin looks at him. The morning light is full on his face now, young and scarred and achingly alive. Yeah, he says. I understand. Below them, Coruscant hums with its own enormous indifference to what has just shifted between these two men on a parapet. The Senate dome catches the light. The traffic moves. The day continues exactly as it would have continued regardless. What has changed is not visible from the outside. But it will be. The annex exists in the temple's lower strata, 3 floors below the training levels, in a corridor that sees traffic perhaps twice a week. Overflow medical storage mostly, and a pair of examination rooms that the healer's hall uses when capacity runs short. At 0400, the corridor is empty in both directions, and the only sound is the low cycling of the ventilation system and the occasional drip from a coolant line that has needed maintenance for 6 months and will, in all likelihood, need it for 6 more. Obi-Wan had requisitioned the room under a training injury notation. The droid, a surplus 2-1B surgical unit, with its external reporting subroutines physically removed by Obi-Wan's own hands over the course of an hour the previous evening, the process more tedious than delicate, like unpicking embroidery, stands in the corner running its pre-procedure calibration sequence. A soft rhythmic clicking. Nothing alarming about it. Cody arrives at 0403. On time for Cody means early. He is in civilian underlayers, no armor, which had been Obi-Wan's one explicit request. The armor stays outside. Whatever happens in this room happens to the man, not the commander. Cody had acknowledged the distinction without comment, which told Obi-Wan he had understood it. He takes the examination table without being asked. Sits on the edge. Looks at the droid, then at Obi-Wan. Walk me through it, he says. Obi-Wan does. The chip is seated against the brainstem, embedded during the growth process on Kamino, before Cody had language or choice or any of the things that make a person, rather than a product. The 2-1B unit will access it through a precision incision at the base of the skull, less than a centimeter. Obi-Wan will maintain a force-assisted trance throughout, stabilizing Cody's neural activity, ensuring the procedure reads as sleep to the body rather than as violation. The chip comes out intact. The incision seals. Recovery time is hours, not days. There will be no scar worth mentioning. Cody listens to all of it. Then he says, "And after? After, you're free." Obi-Wan says it plainly, because it deserves plainness. Whatever loyalty you give after that moment is yours to give. I want to be clear about that. I am not replacing one form of compulsion with another. Something moves behind Cody's eyes that Obi-Wan cannot fully read. Not sentimentality. Cody is constitutionally resistant to sentimentality, but something adjacent to it. Something that has been waiting a long time to find the right container. He swings his legs up onto the table and lies back. Let's get it done, sir. The procedure takes 41 minutes. Obi-Wan sits in a chair pulled to the table's edge, both hands resting open on his knees, the force moving through him and outward in the specific, exacting way that Jedi healing requires, not power. Nothing dramatic, but attention. Pure sustained attention to the body on the table, to the neurological patterns cycling through Cody's brainstem, to the thin electrical signature of the chip itself, which is, now that he is looking at it through the Force, with full knowledge of what he is looking for, unmistakably artificial. A foreign note in an otherwise coherent piece of music. The 21B unit works with the focused efficiency of a machine that has no opinions about what it is doing. Obi-Wan watches through the Force as the incision opens, a sensation not unlike watching someone unlock a door, and the unit's manipulators locate the chip with the help of the imaging feed. Cody's breathing is deep and even. The trance holds. Obi-Wan keeps his attention absolute. This is the most critical window. The chip, during extraction, triggers a brief cascade through the inhibitor pathways as the system registers removal. And if that cascade reaches full expression, it will wake Cody mid-procedure with the chip half-seated and the emergency behavioral protocols firing. Obi-Wan had spent 2 days reviewing what he knew of Kaminoan biotech, which was not enough, and what he knew of force healing, which was more than he had consciously catalogued, and the solution he had arrived at was inelegant but functional. The moment the cascade begins, he smothers it. Not suppresses. Smothers. A clean, total application of force calm to the specific neural architecture where the cascade originates, holding it flat until the chip is clear of the housing. The cascade begins at minute 33. He smothers it. His hands tighten once on his knees and then release. His breathing stays controlled. The 21B unit continues without pause. At minute 41, the unit withdraws its manipulators. On the small tray beside the table, a biochip the size of a fingernail, translucent gray, its edges faintly iridescent. Innocuous. A thing that could pass for a piece of sand. This small object, Obi-Wan thinks, in roughly 3 months, would have sent the order that turned 20 years of brotherhood into a firing squad. He picks it up, holds it between 2 fingers, closes his fist around it. The 21B unit seals the incision. Obi-Wan lets the trance ease, gradually. The way one brings a ship out of hyperspace rather than dropping it, the body needing time to transition rather than being returned to itself all at once. Cody opens his eyes. He lies still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Obi-Wan waits. Cody says. Take your time. Cody sits up slowly, brings a hand to the back of his neck, not touching the incision, which he cannot feel, but something instinctive, some physical acknowledgement of the alteration. His eyes move around the room with the careful, assessing quality of a man running a diagnostic on his own cognition. Different, he says. Then, with the precision he applies to after-action reports, not different in a way I can specify. Just different, that may fade. Maybe, he looks at Obi-Wan directly. Now tell me how you know what you know. Obi-Wan had prepared for this. He had also, over the preceding 2 days, arrived at the conclusion that preparation was insufficient, that the only version of this conversation that would work is the true one, because Cody is exactly the kind of man who can tell the difference between a constructed narrative and the real thing. And because the entire thematic architecture of what Obi-Wan is trying to build rests on radical honesty as its foundation. He cannot use Palpatine's methods to defeat Palpatine. So he tells Cody the rest of it. The Death Star corridor, the collapsing robe, the nothing between, waking up in a body 19 years younger with the full weight of a dead future behind his eyes. He tells it without drama, in the same flat, repertorial tone one uses for mission debriefings, which is the only register that will make it land as real rather than as delusion. Cody is quiet throughout. His face does the thing it does. the absolute controlled neutrality of a man whose discipline is strong enough to hold the full shape of an impossible thing without rejecting it simply because of its shape. When Obi-Wan finishes, Cody says, "You died." Yes, and came back. Into this. A gesture at Obi-Wan's body. The temple. The room. As best I can determine, Cody absorbs this. The ventilation cycles. The drip from the coolant line marks the seconds. "All right," Cody says. Obi-Wan blinks. "All right? I've served with you for 4 years, General." Cody reaches for the underlayer jacket folded at the foot of the table and pulls it on with the efficient economy of someone who is dressed in worse places, under worse conditions. "I've watched you talk a separatist commander into standing down through a ray-shielded door with no comm equipment. I watched you negotiate a prisoner exchange in High Huttas while simultaneously arm-wrestling a Gamorrean so the Hutt would take you seriously." He stands. Straightens. "If you tell me you came back from the dead with knowledge of a chip in my brainstem and 3 months to stop a galaxy-wide massacre, my working assumption is that you're telling the truth. We can establish proof later. Right now, you need to tell me what comes next." Obi-Wan looks at him for a moment. The grief behind his eyes, the sealed door, presses once, and then goes quiet. "The 212th first," he says. "Then the 501st. I'll need you to build me a cover, something the medical officers will accept without routing it up the chain. A separatist neural tampering threat. Plausible, recent, something Cato Neimoidia could have introduced." Cody is already thinking. Obi-Wan can see the operational architecture assembling behind his eyes. The same machinery that makes him the finest second-in-command in the Grand Army. "Give me a day," Cody says. "I'll have a framework." He picks up his helmet from the floor beside the door, pauses with his hand on the frame. "General, yes, for what it's worth. A beat. I'm glad it's you." He leaves. The door closes. The drip from the coolant line resumes its patient count. Obi-Wan opens his fist. The chip sits in his palm. Gray, translucent, smaller than a thumbnail. He carries it to the waste disposal unit in the corner. He drops it in. The office occupies a corner of the Alderanian senatorial suite on the 43rd floor, positioned so that 2 of its walls are transparent steel, and the view looks west over the Senate district as the day dies behind it. The light at this hour is the color of cooling metal, orange at the horizon, gray above, the city's artificial illumination beginning to assert itself in the middle layers of traffic. It is the kind of view that reminds a person how large the Republic is, which is either comforting or devastating, depending on what you know about what is being done to it. Bail Organa stands at the western window with a glass of something amber that he has not touched since Obi-Wan arrived. "Run it back," he says. From the beginning, Obi-Wan runs it back. Not the full account, not the Death Star, not the specificity of foreknowledge that he has shared only with Cody, but the operative skeleton, the chips, the command architecture, the timeline. The scope of what Order 66 is designed to accomplish. He presents it as intelligence, because that is what it functionally is, and because Bail Organa responds to intelligence the way other men respond to arguments. He needs the facts arranged, not the feelings. Bail listens without interrupting. This is one of the qualities that had made him, in the other life, exactly the kind of man who could build a rebellion from components that were never supposed to fit together. He does not fill silence with reaction. He lets information settle before he decides what it means. When Obi-Wan finishes, Bail turns from the window. "You're asking me to fund safe houses," he says. "Pre-positioned, distributed, off any ledger that touches Republic military or Senate appropriations. Safe houses, extraction routes, and a comm beacon network that can push an encrypted signal to Jedi in the field faster than the standard clone command channels. Using Alderanian diplomatic infrastructure as cover. You were already building it," Obi-Wan says. "The delegation of 2000, the contingency discussions. I'm asking you to accelerate what you were already moving toward." Bail sets the untouched glass down on the desk. A small, precise motion. "How do you know about that?" "Because I know you, Senator, and I know what you saw coming, even if you didn't have the full picture of the mechanism." He holds Bail's gaze. You were right. About all of it. You just didn't know the specific shape of the blade. The senator is quiet. The city outside grows brighter as the sky darkens, the inverse relationship between natural and artificial light that defines Coruscant's evenings. Somewhere below them, a political machinery grinds on that does not yet know it is being turned against itself. I'll need Mon Mothma, Bail says finally. Yes, and I'll need something more than your word that this intelligence is reliable. He says it without accusation. A man who has spent 20 years in politics has learned that credibility is infrastructure, not insult. Not because I doubt you. Because the network I build on your word has to survive contact with people who will demand the same accounting. Obi-Wan nods. This is the conversation he had prepared for. Give me 3 weeks. I'll have documented evidence of the chip architecture, physical specimens, medical imaging, the separatist threat cover that my men are already generating. You'll have something you can show. 3 weeks. Bail moves to his desk, sits. The glass stays untouched. The beacon network will take longer than 3 weeks to deploy. I know. Deploy in parallel. The documentation confirms what you've already begun. A pause. Bail's eyes move across the middle distance, tracking the shape of a problem that is already, Obi-Wan can see, becoming an operational question rather than a philosophical one. This is the transition he had been waiting for, the moment Bail Organa stops asking whether and starts asking how. Alderaan has 12 diplomatic transports currently registered for routine senatorial travel, Bail says. 8 of them have cargo manifests that can absorb additional supplies without triggering customs review. He picks up a stylus. Not to write, just to hold, the physical anchor some minds need when they are building. I can have safe houses established on 14 systems within 6 weeks. Rimworlds, mostly places the clone army doesn't prioritize. Rimworlds are where the Jedi will run, Obi-Wan says. Yes, Bail looks at him. That's rather the point. Mon Mothma takes her tea without anything in it, and her intelligence briefings the same way. She sits across from Obi-Wan at a corner table in one of the Senate building's smaller dining facilities. Not the grand rotunda cafeteria where half the Republic's political class eats lunch in full view of the other half, but a quieter annex used mainly by staffers and junior aides, where a Jedi Master and a senior senator can have a conversation that reads, to any observer, as entirely routine. Obi-Wan watches her face as Bail presents the framework, the chips, the beacon network, the cover infrastructure already in motion. Mon Mothma is, he has always thought, the most difficult person in the Republic to read, not because she conceals her reactions, but because her reactions are so precise that they resemble concealment. She feels things in exact, calibrated doses. She does not touch her tea throughout Bail's summary. When he finishes, she says, "The Jedi Order is aware of this?" "Not fully," Obi-Wan says. "Elements of it." "Why not fully?" "Because the Council has a leak I haven't identified yet, and because the kind of institutional response a full briefing would trigger, formal motions, emergency sessions, recorded deliberations, would reach Palpatine's office within 48 hours through channels I cannot currently close." He keeps his voice even. "I am not keeping the Council in the dark, because I distrust them. I'm keeping them in the dark, because right now the dark is the safest place for this to live." Mon Mothma processes this with the same quality of stillness that Bail had shown the previous evening, though where Bail's stillness is the patience of an engineer, hers is the stillness of a woman counting load-bearing walls. "You're asking us to build a structure," she says, "that exists to catch people the Republic is about to drop. Yes, without the Republic knowing it's being built. Yes, and if you're wrong about the timeline, if the event you're describing is further out than 3 months, or takes a different shape, then you have a diplomatic contingency network that costs you nothing but preparation time and a modest appropriation that reads as senatorial travel expenses." Obi-Wan meets her eyes. "I'm not asking you to bet everything on my word, Senator. I'm asking you to build something that is useful regardless of whether I'm right, and catastrophically necessary if I am." Mon Mothma picks up her tea, drinks, sets it down. "The beacons," she says, "they need to be off standard HoloNet frequencies. Palpatine controls too much of the relay infrastructure." Agreed. Bail has a back-channel comm array that runs through Alderaanian diplomatic encryption. I can supplement it through Chandrila. We have 3 independent relay stations that predate the war and don't route through any Republic-administered node. A pause. It will take 4 weeks to adapt them. 4 weeks works. She looks at him across the table. The dining room hums around them, the ordinary sounds of people eating, of political staffers discussing entirely different crises, of a functioning institution that does not yet know what is being built quietly at its edges. Master Kenobi, she says, I want to ask you something directly, and I want a direct answer. Ask, can you actually stop this? The honest answer is, I already failed to stop it once, with less preparation, and here is what that failure looked like. He does not give the honest answer. He gives the true one, which is different. I can stop enough of it, he says, to make what survives survivable. Mon Mothma holds his gaze for 3 full seconds. Whatever the accounting she runs in that precise, calibrated mind of hers, it resolves. Then we begin, she says. The room is exactly as he left it 19 years ago and, simultaneously, exactly as he has never seen it, the books on the shelf in a different order, a half-finished cup of tea gone cold on the desk, a cloak draped over the chair in the way that indicates he had somewhere to be in a hurry when he last removed it. He sits on the edge of the bed, does not lie down. 3 threads running now. The medical cover, advancing through the 212th unit by unit, under Cody's careful hands. The shadow network, Bail and Mon Mothma already moving with the quiet speed of people who have been half ready for exactly this. And Anakin, the most critical thread, the most delicate, the one that cannot be rushed. The sealed door in his chest presses once. He lets it press. He does not open it. He picks up the cold cup of tea, considers it, sets it back down. Outside the temple windows, Coruscant burns with its own light, indifferent and enormous. 3 months from the moment, everything either breaks or holds. He has work to do in the morning. He sleeps. The office is a performance. Obi-Wan had always known this. In the abstract way one knows things about powerful men without examining the knowledge too closely. Standing inside it now, with full comprehension of what the man behind the desk actually is, the performance is almost archaeological. Layer upon layer of carefully constructed warmth. The Naboo artifacts arranged to suggest continuity and culture rather than political calculus. The lighting kept low enough to feel intimate. The desk positioned so that the visitor always sits slightly below the Chancellor's eyeline, without the geometry being obvious enough to register as deliberate. Palpatine rises when Obi-Wan enters. Both hands extended, the smile of a man greeting an old friend. Master Kenobi. What a welcome surprise. Obi-Wan takes the extended hands, shakes them. The physical contact lasts 2 seconds, which is precisely as long as warmth requires, and not a moment longer. Chancellor, thank you for making time. For you always. Palpatine gestures toward the sitting area. 2 chairs arranged at a comfortable angle, a low table between them, the entire arrangement designed to feel like a conversation between equals. He settles into his chair with the ease of a man entirely at home in his own body, and Obi-Wan takes the other chair and sits with the posture of a Jedi Master at rest, which is to say, completely still, completely present, giving away nothing. This is the thing he has prepared for most carefully, more carefully than the medical procedures, more carefully than the political infrastructure, more carefully than anything else the last 3 weeks have required. Because Palpatine is not Bail Organa. He is not Mon Mothma, or Cody, or even Anakin, people whose inner states can be read and responded to honestly. Palpatine is a man who has spent his entire adult life reading other people's inner states and using what he finds there. He is the most dangerous intelligence in the Republic, and he is sitting 4 feet away with a warm smile, and Obi-Wan cannot afford a single uncontrolled tell. The Force is not available as a shield. Palpatine will feel the application of Force concealment the same way a person in a dark room feels someone else's breath, not seeing it, but knowing it is there. So instead Obi-Wan does something more difficult. He makes his inner state true. He thinks about the 212th. He thinks about Cody's methodical progress through the battalion, the fabricated neurological screening running on schedule, 43 chips removed in 3 weeks without a single flag reaching up the command chain. He thinks about Bael's transports, already repositioned. He thinks about Mon Mothma's relay stations, 4 weeks from operational readiness. He lets these things genuinely occupy the surface of his mind, not as a screen, but as the actual content of his awareness, so that what Palpatine reads, if he reaches for it, is a Jedi Master preoccupied with logistics and nothing else. "You seem well," Palpatine observes. "Though perhaps tired. The Outer Rim campaigns have been demanding." "They have," Obi-Wan agrees. "Though I find myself with something rarer than combat. Recently, time to think. A dangerous luxury for a Jedi. The smile doesn't change. The eyes behind it are, as they have always been, doing something entirely different from the smile. And what has all this thinking produced? Concern, mostly. Obi-Wan lets this land simply, as a man reporting a weather observation. The war's shape troubles me. The length of it. The way it has become, normalized almost. I find myself wondering how we look to the ordinary citizens of the Republic. Whether we still look like protectors, or whether we have started to look like something else. This is the terrain he had mapped carefully. A Jedi expressing philosophical doubt about the war is consistent, familiar, unthreatening. It is also the precise kind of conversation Palpatine enjoys. It creates an opening for him to play the wise, politically experienced voice against the Jedi's moral uncertainty, to position himself as the adult in the room. Obi-Wan is giving him exactly the dynamic he prefers, because a predator recalibrating is most visible when it is comfortable. A natural concern, Palpatine says warmly, and one that speaks well of you, that you ask it. Many in your position would simply continue fighting, and leave the philosophical questions to others. A small pause, perfectly weighted. How is Anakin? There it is. The subject change is smooth enough that a less prepared listener would experience it as natural conversation. Obi-Wan experiences it as what it is, a probe, angled at his only visible soft target, deployed with the timing of a man who has identified the opening and moved before the sentence structure could make it look deliberate. Anakin as well, Obi-Wan says. Unconcerned, eager for assignment, as always. I suspect the waiting is harder on him than the campaigns. He is a remarkable young man. The warmth in Palpatine's voice when he speaks about Anakin is the most disturbing thing in the room, because it is real. Not honest. Nothing here is honest. But real. Palpatine genuinely prizes Anakin. That is what makes him dangerous rather than simply evil. I worry about him sometimes. The burden he carries. As do I, Obi-Wan says. Though I find he responds well to being trusted. He's steadier than people give him credit for. He watches Palpatine absorb this, the suggestion that Anakin is stable, supported, less isolated than usual. A micro-adjustment in the Chancellor's expression, gone before it could be called a reaction. The eyes do their work. I'm glad he has you, Palpatine says. Truly there are few relationships in the Order I admire more than the one you and Anakin have built. Though I do wonder, another pause, perfectly placed, whether the Order gives him what he needs. Emotionally, whether it's constraints suit a spirit like his. This is the primary mechanism. Obi-Wan has heard it now in its natural environment, and the engineering of it is genuinely impressive. The concern voiced as care rather than agitation. The critique of the Order framed as sympathy for Anakin rather than as manipulation. The whole structure positioned so that agreement feels like loyalty to Anakin, and disagreement feels like Jedi rigidity. He does not take the opening. I think the Order suits him better than it once did. Obi-Wan says mildly. He's grown into it. As we all do, eventually. A small smile. Though I take your point, he needs room to breathe, and I've tried to give him more of that recently. More honest conversation. Less formality. He lets this sit for exactly a moment. It's made a difference, I think. The adjustment in Palpatine's expression this time is more contained than the last one. Almost invisible. But Obi-Wan has spent 3 weeks preparing to read this particular face, at this particular granularity, and what he sees is a man recognizing, without yet understanding, that a variable he had been relying upon has moved. He has Anakin as confidant. That is what Palpatine is recalculating. He had Anakin as the isolated secret keeper, and now something has shifted, and he cannot locate the shift from the outside. The conversation continues for another 15 minutes. Obi-Wan keeps his surface thoughts exactly where they are. Logistics, concerns about the war's optics, the ordinary preoccupations of a general between campaigns. He asks 2 questions about Senate proceedings that are genuinely interesting to him as cover and actually useful for the network's political timing. He laughs once at a remark of Palpatine's that is genuinely, if coldly, witty. When he stands to leave, Palpatine takes his hand again. "We must do this more often," the Chancellor says. "These conversations, I value them." "As do I," Obi-Wan says. He means it, actually. Each conversation is data. Each data point is preparation. Coruscant, the Senate district. A side street. Immediately after. He walks 3 blocks before he allows his hands to unclench. The motion is private and small. He is walking a busy street and nobody notices, which is by design, and the unclenching takes perhaps half a second. Then his hands are still again, and his pace is steady, and he looks, to every passing eye, like a Jedi master on his way somewhere unremarkable. Inside his chest, the sealed door strains once against its hinges. Because Palpatine had looked at him with those eyes, the ones doing the real work behind the warmth, and somewhere in the 15 minutes of careful performance, Obi-Wan had felt the specific gravity of what this man is. Not evil in the abstract, not the Sith Lord of legend, just a person of extraordinary intelligence and total moral vacancy, sitting in a chair and slowly turning the Republic into a weapon pointed at everyone who trusts it. He breathes. He keeps walking. He has 8 weeks left. The network is growing. The chips are being removed. Anakin is no longer alone with his secrets. It is not enough yet. It is going to have to become enough. Anakin finds him here. Obi-Wan has been sitting by the same fountain pool for 40 minutes, not meditating. He has tried meditating, and found that the version of himself currently occupying this body is not capable of the required stillness. That there is too much pressure behind the sealed door tonight, and the Force, rather than offering distance from it, keeps conducting the feeling back into him with the patient insistence of a tide. So, he is simply sitting, watching the water move, letting the coolness of the room do what it does. Anakin drops onto the stone lip beside him without preamble or announcement, the way he has been doing since he was a Padawan who needed somewhere to put his restlessness. He is in his training clothes, his hair is damp, he smells of exertion and the particular metallic edge of someone who has been running Force-enhanced drills past the point of wisdom. He does not speak immediately, neither does Obi-Wan. This is one of the things that has always been true between them and that Obi-Wan has not let himself miss until now, that they can exist in the same silence without either of them needing to fill it. Most of the people in Obi-Wan's life require the silence to mean something. With Anakin, it has always simply been silence, which is its own form of trust. "I had the dream again," Anakin says. His voice is flat. Not the flatness of suppression, but the flatness of a man who has been carrying something heavy long enough that the muscles have simply adapted to the weight. Obi-Wan knows, without asking, which dream. He has known since the morning on the parapet, since Anakin said she's pregnant and the whole architecture of the original catastrophe rearranged itself into its true shape. Not political, not philosophical, just a young man who loves his wife and is terrified in a frequency that Palpatine had learned to play like an instrument. "Tell me," Obi-Wan says. Anakin looks at the water. "It's always the same. There's a medical bay, I think, or somewhere sterile, and she's dying and I can't." He stops. Starts again. "I can't do anything. I'm there and I'm useless. The sentence ends without ending. The water moves. The oil lamps along the wall burn without flickering. "How long have you been having it?" Obi-Wan asks. "Weeks. It gets worse." A pause. "I know what the Order says about dreams. I know they're not. I know the doctrine. But Obi-Wan." He turns to look at him, and there is something raw in his face that the doctrine has no answer for. It feels like a warning. It feels like something I'm supposed to stop. Obi-Wan is quiet for a moment, not composing an answer, actually feeling the weight of what has just been placed on the stone between them. Because this is the moment. He has known it was coming, and he has prepared for it, and the preparation is, right now, completely inadequate. Because no prepared answer is equal to the specific living grief in Anakin Skywalker's face at 22 years old, carrying a terror that in another life was weaponized into the destruction of everything he loved. He makes a decision. The same kind of decision he made in the Death Star corridor, in the sense that it costs something and is made anyway. He opens the door. "Anakin," he says, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you decide what to do with it. Can you do that?" The quality of Anakin's attention shifts. The rawness doesn't leave his face, but it is joined by the focused stillness he brings to things that matter. Yes, the dreams are not just dreams. A beat. Anakin's jaw tightens. "How do you?" "Because I know how it ends," Obi-Wan says. Or how it ended. In a version of events that I am here, specifically, to prevent. He holds Anakin's gaze with the steadiness he has been building toward for 6 weeks. "I know this is going to sound, tell me." Anakin's voice is very quiet. "Just tell me." So he does. He tells him about Padam, the medical bay on Polis Massa, the twins delivered in crisis. The life force leaving her not through injury, but through grief and loss of will. A broken heart made literal in the specific cruel way the force sometimes literalizes things. He does not soften it. He does not manage it. He gives it to Anakin the way Anakin has always needed things given to him, directly, without the protective architecture of Jedi Council wrapped around the outside. Anakin is completely still throughout, his hands on his knees, his eyes on Obi-Wan's face. Then Obi-Wan tells him the rest. Palpatine, and what he is, and the Plagueis legend used as a lever against a father's terror. The chip and Order 66, and the burning temple, and the empire built on the bodies of everyone they both love. He tells it without self-exculpation, his own role in the original failure, the rigidity and the distance and the 10,000 small moments where honesty might have changed the architecture of what was coming. He does not make himself the villain of the account, because accuracy is not the same as self-flagellation, but he does not protect himself from the true shape of his failures either. He tells Anakin about the desert. 19 years. The boy growing up across the sand, watched from a distance, untouchable. What that cost. What it was for. He tells him about the Death Star corridor, the robe collapsing empty. When he finishes, the room of 1,000 fountains is very quiet. The water continues its small, indifferent motions. The lamps burn. Anakin has not moved. "She dies," he says. His voice is stripped of everything except the fact. "She dies because of what I become." In that version, Obi-Wan says, "Yes, and the babies. They survive. They're hidden. They grow up not knowing each other." He holds the weight of this evenly. Luke on Tatooine. Leia on Alderaan. Something moves through Anakin's face at the name Luke. Recognition. Maybe, or the specific ache of a future that almost happened, and then it is gone, and what replaces it is the expression Obi-Wan has been most afraid of, the one he cannot entirely predict. Not rage, not grief, but a cold and total reckoning. "Why are you telling me this now?" Anakin says. "Because you came to me with the dream," Obi-Wan says. "And because I am done, permanently and without exception done, with the idea that keeping you in the dark is the same as keeping you safe." His voice does not rise. It does not need to. And because you deserve to know the shape of what was being done to you, what Palpatine was doing, what the fear was being made into, and how deliberately. Anakin's eyes close. His hands, flat on his knees, press down against the stone once, and then release. "He was going to use me," he says. Not a question. He did use you. In the version I came from, he did. The fear of losing Padam became the mechanism. He offered you a path to save her, the power over death. knowing you would take it, knowing what it would require. And I took it. The words sit between them. Obi-Wan does not rush to fill them. You were alone, he says finally. You were carrying it alone, and he was the only person who didn't judge you for it. And the door I should have opened years ago I left shut, because I was afraid of what was behind it. That's on me. Anakin, that specific failure is mine. Anakin opens his eyes. For a long moment he simply looks at Obi-Wan, with the expression of a man who has just had a structural wall removed from a building he thought was holding him up, and has discovered, with shock, that he is still standing. The babies, he says. Luke and Leia, both healthy, as far as I know. Padmé is 3 months along. There's time. She's not going to die. It is not a question. It is a declaration, made in the register Anakin uses for things he intends to make true through sheer force of commitment. No, Obi-Wan says. She's not. Anakin nods once. The motion is small and absolute. The way a cornerstone being placed is small and absolute. It doesn't announce itself. It just becomes the thing everything else rests on. What do you need from me? He says. The grief behind Obi-Wan's eyes presses against its door one final time. Then, quietly, it releases. Not gone, not resolved, but no longer sealed, transformed instead into something that can be carried in the open, in daylight, alongside another person. Everything, Obi-Wan says, starting with Mace Windu. Anakin's mouth curves, dry, familiar, entirely himself. Great, he says. My favorite conversation. The water moves. The lamps burn. Outside the temple windows, Coruscant continues its enormous, indifferent brilliance, 3 weeks from the moment that in another life broke everything, bearing no outward sign that this time, in this quiet room, something has finally been set right. The room is small and unremarkable by design. Every other space Palpatine occupies has been engineered for effect. The Grand Office, the Senate podium, the intimate sitting areas arranged to make visitors feel simultaneously welcomed and assessed. This room is different. No windows, no art, a single comm terminal, hardened and isolated from the standard HoloNet relay infrastructure. Its encryption architecture personally specified by Darth Sidious 2 decades before anyone called him Chancellor. A chair, a lamp that casts light straight down and nowhere else. He sits in the chair at 0340, and he is very still. Something has been wrong for 6 weeks. He has been patient with the wrongness, has observed it, catalogued it, run the threads of it through his fingers in the dark, and tried to identify where they originate. The variables he can name. Anakin Skywalker is different. Calmer. Less available as an emotional instrument than he was 2 months ago. Obi-Wan Kenobi has been visiting the Senate district with a frequency and a purposefulness that exceeds anything his known operations require. 3 senators from the delegation of 2000 have made unusual infrastructure appropriations that read, on the surface, as routine diplomatic travel preparation, but carry the specific pattern of people pre-positioning resources rather than simply moving them. None of these threads, individually, constitutes a threat he cannot manage. Together they constitute something he has not encountered before, something that requires a revision of timeline. He reaches for the comm terminal. The decision has the quality of cold water, not pleasant, but clarifying. He had intended Order 66 to fire at the moment of maximum readiness, the sequence he had refined across decades of careful engineering, Grievous killed on Utapau. Anakin turned on Mace, the Senate session, the proclamation. Each piece in its correct position, the whole architecture producing its intended result with the inevitability of mathematics. He is compressing the mathematics now because the alternative is allowing Kenobi more time, and Palpatine has spent enough years studying patience to know when patience has become exposure. He inputs the command sequence. The terminal hums once, low and private. Order 66 transmits at 0341. He sits back. He does not feel doubt. He feels the recalibration of a predator who has changed angle without changing intention, and he begins, already, to construct the next sequence of moves from the new position. What he does not feel, cannot feel, because he does not know. is what is waiting on the other end of the signal. The directive hits Cody's comm unit at 0341 and 17 seconds. He is awake. He has been awake since 0300, which is his habit during active operational phases, and he is sitting at the small desk in his quarters, reviewing the updated screening schedule when the comm lights up with the priority signal. The encryption header resolves. The command string presents itself in clean, standard military text. Order 66, execute. Cody reads it. He sits with it for a moment, the way you sit with a thing you have been told is coming, and which has arrived anyway, with the full force of its reality. The directive tries to fire. This is the only way he can describe it. Later, to Obi-Wan. In the debrief that will take place in a very different room under very different circumstances. It tries to fire the way a weapon tries to fire. When you pull the trigger and find the chamber empty, the mechanism completes its motion. Everything operates as designed, and then there is simply nothing there. No chip, no cascade, no compulsion rising through the brainstem to override the 20 years of memory and loyalty and considered choice that constitute Commander CC-2224. He sits with the empty chamber for 3 seconds. Then he is moving. Ki-Adi-Mundi is on a ridge overlooking a separatist fortification when the beacon fires. It comes through the modified frequency. The back-channel Mon Mothma's relay stations have been pushing through Alderaanian diplomatic encryption for 3 weeks. Quiet and constant. The signal that means now. Move. The extraction coordinates are. His comm unit pulses once against his wrist. He looks at his clones arrayed along the ridge below him. His men. Men he has fought beside for 3 years. Men whose specific laughs and habits and small particular loyalties he knows the way you know the geography of a place you have spent a long time surviving. He looks at them, and the beacon's single pulse sits in his chest with the specific weight of the knowledge Obi-Wan's shadow network has been carrying for 6 weeks. Not all of their chips have been removed. The screening operation reached the core battalions, the 212th and significant elements of the 501st. It could not reach everyone. The logistics were never equal to the scale, and Obi-Wan had never pretended otherwise. What the beacon buys is seconds. Enough seconds to move. Ki-Adi-Mundi moves. He is off the ridge and into the ruins before the Order 66 directive reaches his battalion's comm channel, and when it fires he is already 3 levels down, his lightsaber drawing a line through the durasteel door behind him that seals the descent corridor. He hears the blaster fire from the other side. He does not stop. He does not stop because the extraction coordinates in the beacon pulse are specific, and the window is narrow, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, who apparently knows things that cannot be known, told him exactly this. Move immediately. Question nothing. Trust the route. He trusts the route. Aayla Secura does not make it. This is the cost that Obi-Wan had named in Bail Organa's office, that Mon Mothma had absorbed over untouched tea, that Cody had built into the operational framework with the grim arithmetic of a soldier who knows that triage is not failure. But the beacon's reach had not extended to Felucia's comm infrastructure in time. The relay routing had hit a node failure 2 days prior that nobody had caught. And when Order 66 fires her chip-intact battalion is already positioned, and the angle is wrong, and the window that existed for Ki-Adi-Mundi does not exist here. The blaster fire on Felucia is very brief. The jungle does not notice. Rex receives Cody's signal at 0347 and 30 seconds, and the 6 words of it are sufficient. Order fired. Move on the Senate. Rex has been waiting for these words for 3 weeks. His chip was removed in the second wave of Cody's screening operation, the procedure run in a different medical annex by a different 21B unit, but the same careful hands holding the same force-assisted trance, and he woke from it with the same quality of stillness Cody had described. The empty chamber. The mechanism completing its motion and finding nothing. He has the 501st elements that matter, 43 troopers, all screened, all clean, assembled and moving within 90 seconds of Cody's signal. Full kit. Non-lethal containment gear prioritized for the Coruscant Guard engagement, because these are not enemies. These are brothers with chips still seated, and compulsion still active. And Rex has been explicit with his people about the distinction. He finds Cody at the Senate building's east entrance at 0352. Cody looks exactly as he always looks, which is to say completely unreadable, which Rex has always interpreted as a form of steadiness. "Feels good," Rex says. "To choose this one, sir." Cody looks at him. Something in the commander's face, not warmth exactly. Cody does not traffic in warmth, but the functional equivalent of it that he has developed across years of choosing competence as his primary love language. "Copy that," Cody says. "Lock it down. Nobody in or out until the general gives the word." They move. The unit pulses once. Obi-Wan is already dressed. He has been dressed since 0300, sitting in the chair in his quarters with the quality of stillness that is not patience but its disciplined imitation, the knowledge that the next hours will require everything, and that everything must be conserved until it is needed. He reads the pulse. Cody's identifier. One word. Fired. He stands. Across the city, in a room 2 floors below the guest quarters where Padme Amidala has been staying since a senatorial session ran long 3 days ago, and Anakin arranged, quietly and without explanation, for the visit to extend, Anakin Skywalker is already at his door. They had agreed on this. If the signal came at night, they moved together. No separation, no division of effort, no moment where either of them was alone with what was coming. Anakin's face in the corridor is the face of a man who is afraid and has decided that the fear is not, currently, the most important thing. "How many?" he asks. Cody says the Senate is containable. The temple is secure. Obi-Wan hears, somewhere in the city's ambient noise, the distant percussion of blaster fire from the direction of the barracks, the Coruscant Guard engaging, chips active, doing what the chip tells them to do, and Rex's people moving to contain rather than destroy. The losses in the field. He stops. He does not finish the sentence. He does not need to. Anakin's jaw sets. The fear moves through his face once, fully visible. And then he does something Obi-Wan has never seen him do in any version of any life. He lets it move through, and he does not reach for it, and he does not let it become something else. "Mace," Anakin says. "We need Mace." "Already signaled," Obi-Wan says. "He's meeting us at the lift." They move. The silence from the 501st reaches Palpatine at 0400 exactly. He is still in the comm suite when the absence registers. Not a signal, not a report, not the confirmation of temple breach that his operational sequence requires at this stage. Nothing. The channel that should be carrying the sound of his design executing is carrying only static, and Palpatine sits with this for precisely 4 seconds before his mind begins its recalculation. The 212th silence he had already logged. Kenobi's battalion had been the first anomaly, the data point that confirmed the wrongness he had been cataloging for 6 weeks. He had attributed it, tentatively, to Kenobi's personal proximity to the Order's target, some residual loyalty complicating the chip's execution, a known failure mode in units with extended Jedi attachment. Manageable. The 501st silence is not manageable. The 501st is Skywalker's battalion, and Skywalker has not been Kenobi's confidant in any way Palpatine's surveillance has detected. And the two silences together constitute a pattern that his mind assembles and then immediately, with the cold efficiency of a man who has survived decades, by knowing when a position is untenable, sets aside in favor of the next available option. He reaches for the comm terminal again. The Coruscant Guard, not clone battalions, his personal household troops, loyalists drawn from non-clone stock for exactly this kind of contingency. He inputs the activation sequence. The Guard mobilizes at 0401. It is, he knows already, too slow. The Guard is a contingency for a plan that is already compromised. But a man of his particular philosophy does not simply stop because the preferred sequence has failed. He adapts. He finds the next angle. He is in the process of identifying the next angle when his door opens without announcement, and Mas Amedda enters with the specific expression of a man who has received information he does not want to be the one to deliver. "Chancellor," Amedda says. "There are clone troopers in the rotunda." Palpatine's expression does not change. "Which battalions?" "Both." A pause. "They appear to be securing the building. Non-lethally." The recalibration completes. Palpatine rises from the chair. The rotunda at 0403 is enormous and mostly empty, its thousands of senatorial pods retracted. The great central space open all the way to the dome. Under normal circumstances, the acoustic quality of the room is remarkable. Voices carry in it. Footsteps echo. The architecture designed to make every speaker feel the weight of what they are addressing. Under current circumstances, it carries the sound of boots, organized and precise, as Cody's lead elements move through the entry level and begin the systematic lockdown of egress points. Cody works from the eastern entrance inward, his section covering the primary access corridors while Rex's people take the rotunda floor itself. The communication between them is minimal and efficient. Hand signals where possible, brief coded bursts on the encrypted channel where not, the kind of operational economy that develops between people who have been doing this long enough that the words are mostly unnecessary. The Coruscant Guard makes contact at 0406. They come from the Northern Service Corridor, 16 of them in crimson armor, moving fast, not the organized advance of a unit with a clear objective, but the urgent scramble of people responding to an emergency they were not fully briefed on, which is its own kind of tactical information. Cody reads it in the first 3 seconds of contact. These are men following orders from a comm unit, not men who know what they are defending or why. Non-lethal, he says. Once, his people already know. The engagement lasts 90 seconds. Stun settings, coordinated crossfire angles, the guard's numerical advantage neutralized by the choke point geometry of the service corridor that Cody had identified in the building schematics 3 weeks ago when he was first given the operational brief. 16 men down, none dead, all breathing. Cody steps over the nearest one without pausing. He finds Rex at the rotunda's center. Northern corridors clear, Cody says. Rex looks at the scope of the rotunda around them, the vast empty space, the retracted pods, the dome above catching the first gray suggestion of dawn through its upper apertures. This is a strange place to save the Republic. Every place is strange, Cody says. Lock the dome access. The pocket of still chipped troopers numbers 9. Cody identifies them at 0411 when a movement sensor in the sublevel flags unauthorized activity in the service passage that runs beneath the rotunda, a maintenance corridor that the operational brief had listed as secondary priority, which means it was covered but not densely, and 9 troopers with active chips and a functional objective constitute exactly the kind of near miss that well-built plans absorb, and poorly built plans die from. He takes 4 of his people and goes himself. The service passage is narrow enough that they move single file, the low ceiling close overhead, the light the flat emergency illumination of a space not designed for sustained occupation. Cody can hear the 9 ahead of them, not their movement, which is professional and quiet, but the comm traffic. The chip-driven urgency of men trying to reach an objective that has been cut off. He stops his people with a fist raised. He thinks. The problem is not tactical. He can take 9 troopers in a narrow corridor with 4 of his people and do it cleanly. The problem is what 9 troopers with active inhibitor chips represent, which is 9 people who are not choosing this, who are executing a compulsion they cannot feel as compulsion, and who will, in the hours following this night, have to live inside the memory of what the chip made them try to do. Cody has been living adjacent to that knowledge for 6 weeks, and it has not gotten lighter. He puts his weapon on its lowest stun setting and signals his people to do the same. Then he steps around the corner alone, hands visible, and says, "Stand down." The 9 troopers turn. Weapons come up. "I'm Commander Cody, CC 2224, 212th Attack Battalion." His voice carries in the passage with the flat authority of a man who has been giving orders in bad lighting for 4 years. "You're responding to an Order 66 directive. I know what it's telling you to do. I know it feels like a lawful command from the Supreme Chancellor." He keeps his hands where they are. "It's not. There is a device in your brainstem that is making you feel this way. When this is over, I'm going to have it removed, and you're going to understand what I mean." A pause. "Until then, I'm asking you to stand down and trust me the way you'd trust your commanding officer. Because that's what I am." 8 of the 9 lower their weapons by degrees, not surrendering, not convinced, but the specific hesitation of soldiers whose training includes the weight of chain of command, and chain of command says the commander outranks the chip's insistence. The The ninth raises his weapon at Cody's chest. The stun bolt from Cody's left puts him down before it can fire. One of Cody's people, who had moved into the corridor mouth silently during the speech, holsters without comment. Cody looks at the 8 standing troopers. "Thank you," he says. "Secure them here. They'll be screened before morning." He turns back toward the rotunda. The confirmation reaches Obi-Wan's comm unit at 0419. Senate secure. Rotunda locked. Guard neutralized, non-lethal. 9 incidentals in custody. Ready for your word. He reads it once, passes the unit to Anakin, who reads it, and passes it to Mace Windu, who reads it with the expression he applies to satisfactory tactical outcomes, which is no expression at all. They are standing in the east concourse of the Senate building, 3 levels below the Chancellor's office suite. The 3 of them having moved through the building's secured perimeter 30 seconds after Cody's lockdown confirmation came through. The concourse is empty. The building has the quality of a held breath. "He'll know we're coming," Anakin says. "He's known since 0341, Obi-Wan says, when Order 66 fired, and the temple didn't burn. Mace Windu looks up toward the ceiling, in the direction of the office suite 3 levels above them, with the expression of a man who has been waiting for something for a long time, and has arrived at the patience's end. Then, we shouldn't keep him waiting. Obi-Wan looks at Anakin. Anakin looks back at him with the face he has been wearing since the corridor outside his quarters 2 hours ago. The fear present, the fear not winning, the choice made and held in the body the way choices have to be held when the next minutes require everything. Obi-Wan nods once. They move toward the lift. Above them, Coruscant's dawn is beginning its slow assertion over the city's artificial light, the sky at the upper levels shifting from the absolute black of deep night toward the gray that precedes the sun. The specific uncertain color of a moment that has not yet resolved into what it is going to be. Below them, the rotunda holds. The legions hold. The network holds. 3 people step into the lift. The doors close. The lift opens onto a corridor that has already been altered. Not dramatically. Palpatine does not do dramatic until dramatic is the only remaining instrument. But the 2 Senate guards who should be flanking the corridor entrance are absent, and the lighting in the passage has been shifted from its standard warm register to something cooler. Harder. The kind of light that strips shadow rather than creating it. Obi-Wan reads these as what they are, a man who knows he is being approached, and has chosen the terrain of the confrontation. He signals to Mace and Anakin without breaking stride. Mace moves left, taking the wall. Anakin moves right. Obi-Wan continues down the corridor's center, lightsaber not yet drawn. The Ceresu practitioner's first principle operating as it always does: do not commit until the geometry is fully understood, because the geometry is always information. The office doors are open. Palpatine stands behind his desk. He is in his Chancellor's robes, the formal burgundy of his public role, and he is completely still. Not the stillness of a man caught unprepared, the stillness of a man who has made his calculation and arrived at the other side of it, and is now simply waiting for the next phase to begin. His hands are at his sides. His face is the face Obi-Wan saw across a tea table 6 weeks ago, the warmth entirely absent now, stripped back to the architecture underneath, which is very old and very cold, and carries the weight of decades of patient, absolute contempt for everyone who could not see what was in front of them. "Master Kenobi," he says. "And Anakin." "And Mace." The eyes move across the 3 of them with the efficiency of a weapons system acquiring targets. "I had rather hoped for a larger audience." "The audience is secured in the rotunda," Mace says, "along with your guard." Something moves behind Palpatine's eyes. Not surprise. The recalibration is complete. He is past surprise now, operating entirely in the mode of a man managing damage rather than preventing it. "I see." "Sheev Palpatine," Obi-Wan says, and uses the name deliberately, the civilian name, the name that belongs to the man rather than the Chancellor or the Sith Lord. Because names matter and precision matters, and he wants Palpatine to feel the specific weight of being reduced to what he actually is. "You are under arrest for conspiracy against the Republic, for the engineering of the Clone Wars, and for crimes against the Jedi Order." He pauses. "I would prefer you come without demonstrating the alternative." Palpatine looks at him for a long moment. Then he smiles. And the smile is the truest thing Obi-Wan has ever seen on his face. Not warmth, not contempt, but something almost like delight. The expression of a man who has spent his entire life performing and has finally been given permission to stop. "No," he says. "I don't think I will." The lightsaber appears from his sleeve. Crimson, a single blade, igniting with the specific sharp hiss of a weapon that has been waiting a very long time for this room. The Juyo flourish that follows is theatrical and entirely deliberate. The aggressive assertion of space designed to make the opponent react before they have finished understanding what they are reacting to. It is, Obi-Wan thinks in the half-second before everything accelerates, the opening of a man who has defeated Jedi Masters before and knows precisely which fear to plant in the first instant of engagement. Mace Windu is already moving. His Vapod is the only lightsaber form in the Jedi canon designed to engage the dark side directly, not deflect it, not contain it, but channel it. Use the opponent's own ferocity as a current that flows back into itself. He has spent 30 years developing it to the point where his own darkness is not a liability, but a precisely calibrated instrument, and Palpatine knows this, which is why he goes for Anakin first. A desk chair crosses the room faster than furniture should be capable of moving. Anakin cuts it in half without breaking stride, his blade already up, and the two of them engage in the space behind Obi-Wan's left shoulder, while Obi-Wan positions himself between Mace and the door, not the flashiest role, but the correct one, the Ceresu anchor that prevents Palpatine from controlling the room's geometry by forcing a breach. The office is large, but not large enough for this, and Palpatine knows this too. He is trying to use the furniture, the desk, the architectural features of the room as separating obstacles, to isolate Mace or Anakin into a one-on-one exchange, where his decades of Sith refinement can operate without the others intervening. The strategy is sound. It would work against 3 Jedi who were not working as a unit. These 3 are working as a unit. Obi-Wan does not engage Palpatine directly. He moves in Mace's peripheral coverage, filling the gaps. When Palpatine's footwork opens a line toward the window and the escape vector it represents, Obi-Wan is already in that line, not attacking, simply present. His guard the calm, impenetrable wall that Ceresu makes of a master's defense. When Anakin is pushed back by a force-enhanced overhand that would cave in a lesser duelist's guard, Obi-Wan steps into the pressure, absorbs it through his blade, and redirects it with the minimum necessary force, so that Anakin has the half-second he needs to reset. Palpatine registers what is happening and goes harder. The Force lightning comes without warning, a sustained arc directed not at Obi-Wan or Mace but at the ceiling fixture above Anakin's head, not attacking Anakin, attacking the environment around him, the Sith instinct for terrain over target. The fixture drops. Anakin catches it with the Force and holds it, suspended, 3 meters above the floor while continuing his footwork. The casual brutality of the effort, the specific Skywalker quality of doing something that should require complete concentration as an afterthought. He looks at the suspended fixture, looks at Palpatine, puts it down gently to his left, out of the way. Palpatine's eyes go briefly, purely, flat. The duel runs for 6 minutes. Obi-Wan will account for them later, in the debrief, as 6 minutes of the most demanding Ceresu he has ever performed, not because Palpatine is faster or stronger than the worst he has faced, but because the full, refined weight of a lifetime devoted entirely to the dark side is as close to perfect as anything that lives, and perfection is exhausting to contain. There are 3 moments where a different outcome is visible, not likely, but visible. The dark alternative hanging in the air the way all alternatives hang in the air during close-run things. He does not look at the alternatives. He looks at his blade and his footwork and Mace's position, and Anakin's. The opening comes at minute 6. Palpatine extends on an overcommitted thrust at Mace, the instinct to end it, the Sith impatience that lives beneath even the most refined discipline. The desire to finish rather than continue that Mace's Vapad has been specifically engineering for 6 minutes by feeding the man's own ferocity back into him in increasing doses. The extension takes his blade a centimeter too far forward and opens his offside guard for the duration of a breath. Obi-Wan breathes. Any day now, Anakin is already there. Not reckless, that is the thing Obi-Wan will remember. Not the wild, overcommitted strike of a man acting on anger, but something clean and economical and precise. The blow of a person who is calm because he is not alone in this room, because there are two people beside him who are not going anywhere. Because the fear that was supposed to make him reckless has been, for 6 weeks, in one conversation at a time, in a room with a fountain and an honest reckoning, gradually, painstakingly, replaced by something that holds rather than burns. The blade takes Palpatine's lightsaber at the hilt, not the wrist, Anakin is precise, but the hilt itself, a disarming strike that requires the kind of spatial accuracy that only happens when the hand knows exactly what it is doing, and exactly why. The crimson blade extinguishes. Palpatine staggers back. His hand is empty. His face is, for the first time in the entire engagement, for perhaps the first time in decades, simply present, stripped of performance and recalculation and the constant managing machinery of a man who has never stopped strategizing long enough to simply be where he is. He looks at Anakin, then at Obi-Wan. He says nothing. There is, for once, nothing to say. Mace Windu's blade comes to rest at the Chancellor's throat, with the unhurried certainty of a man who has been waiting his entire career for this geometry to resolve. "It's over," Mace says. The three of them stand in the wreckage of the room. Obi-Wan becomes aware of his own breathing, deeper than normal, the controlled excess of a body that has been working at its limit and is now permitted to begin returning. His hands are steady. He is mildly surprised by this, though he should not be. He has spent 2 months building toward this moment with the particular quality of preparation that leaves no room for surprise. Anakin lowers his blade. The office around them is destroyed in the specific way intense lightsaber combat destroys a room, not explosively, but precisely. Every piece of furniture and decorative element that intersected a blade's path cut cleanly through, the geometry of the fight mapped in the room's ruins. He looks at Obi-Wan. There are no words immediately available, and neither of them reaches for inadequate ones. Mace Windu produces a set of force-dampening restraints from his cloak, prepared, because Mace Windu prepares, and secures Palpatine's wrists with the practiced efficiency of a man who has been in this situation before, though never with this specific prisoner. The Senate will need to convene by 0800, Mace says, full session, public disclosure. Bail is already positioned for that, Obi-Wan says. Mace looks at him, with the particular expression that means we are going to have an extensive conversation about the last 2 months. Obi-Wan receives this expression without alarm. Yes, Mace says. We are. Outside the office windows, Coruscant's dawn has arrived. Not the tentative gray of an hour ago, but the full, committed gold of actual morning. The sun clearing the horizon of the lower city and coming through the transparent steel in long, flat bars that fall across the ruined floor, the overturned furniture, the extinguished lightsaber lying where Anakin's strike sent it. Anakin looks at the light for a moment. His face, in it, is the face of someone who has just discovered that a future they were certain of has been replaced by one they are not, and that the new one, impossibly, looks like something they might be able to live in. He clips his saber to his belt. Come on, he says. Padam's going to hear about this before we can get to her. Obi-Wan follows him out. The chamber fills in the way that chambers fill when the thing being convened is historic, not with the ordinary shuffle of senatorial business, the aides and assistants and political adjacents who populate routine sessions, but with the specific quality of attention that descends on a room when everyone present understands they are inside a moment that will be described to people who weren't there. Bail Organa speaks first. He had been positioned for exactly this, as Obi-Wan said, and he speaks with the measured precision of a man who has been rehearsing the shape of this disclosure for 6 weeks, without being certain he would ever deliver it. He presents the inhibitor chips. He presents the documented chain of command running from Kamino's growth facilities to Palpatine's private comm suite. He presents the Order 66 transmission log, timestamped at 0341, originating from the hardened terminal in the sub-level room with no windows and no art. He presents Darth Sidious. The chamber's reaction is not a sound so much as a pressure. The collective intake of breath from 2,000 senators resolving into something that has no single name. The specific quality of an institution discovering that the thing it trusted most was the thing aimed at it. Mon Mothma speaks second. She presents the network, the safe houses, the beacon relays, the Alderanian transports, the back-channel encryption that ran through Chandrila's pre-war relay stations. She presents it not as a triumph but as a triage, which is what it was, and she is honest about what the triage did not reach. The names she does not say aloud, because the Senate floor is not the right place for that accounting, and she knows it. The vote to dissolve the emergency powers and begin Palpatine's trial passes before 1,000. Bail finds Obi-Wan in a side corridor afterward. He does not say anything immediately. He stands beside him looking at nothing in particular, and Obi-Wan stands beside him, and the corridor holds them both in its quiet, while the chamber behind them continues its work. It held. Bail says finally, it held. Obi-Wan agrees. The council sits in its circle of 12 seats and looks at Obi-Wan Kenobi for a long time after he finishes. He has given them the full account. Not the edited version he gave Bail, not the operational skeleton he gave Mon Mothma, the complete architecture including the Death Star corridor, including the 19 years of desert, including every decision he made in the 2 months between waking up in a 38-year-old body and walking into Palpatine's office at 0423, with Anakin and Mace beside him. He has answered every question without qualification, and without the instinct, which was present throughout, to manage their reactions by shaping the information. Yoda speaks first. Known to us, this was not, he says. His voice carries the weight of a being who has lived 900 years and is, even now, finding room for something new to settle in. Acted alone, you did, without the Council's knowledge or sanction. Yes, Obi-Wan says. And yet. Yoda's eyes, half closed, rest on him with the quality of attention that has always felt to Obi-Wan less like being looked at and more like being read. Here we sit. The chamber is quiet. The Coruscant morning comes through the windows and falls across the circle of seats with the same gold it has always brought. The same light that has fallen in this chamber for 10,000 years, falling now on an institution that is not the same as it was a week ago, and knows it. Mace Windu speaks. His voice carries the particular restraint of a man being careful not to say the thing that would be satisfying to say but would not be true. The rigidity was ours, he says. It costs him something to say it. He says it anyway. The isolation was something we built and maintained and called tradition. A pause. You built something else in 2 months that our tradition couldn't. Ki-Adi-Mundi, alive and present in his council seat by virtue of a beacon pulse that reached Megiddo at 0341 and 17 seconds, says nothing. He had said what needed saying when Obi-Wan met him at the extraction point 3 days ago. He does not repeat himself. He simply sits in his seat and breathes, which is its own form of testimony. The council does not offer Obi-Wan an apology, because the council does not speak in those terms, and Obi-Wan does not need one. What it offers instead is something rarer and more useful, the specific, institutional acknowledgement that the structure requires rebuilding, and that the rebuilding should be led by someone who has already demonstrated what rebuilding looks like. Yoda says, Grandmaster, the title is yours. If carry it you will. Obi-Wan looks around the circle, at the faces of people he has known for decades and grieved for 19 years and saved, imperfectly at considerable cost, with the help of a commander and 2 senators and a young man who chose not to be afraid. I'll carry it, he says. On one condition. Yoda's ears rise slightly. Speak, we change how we teach attachment, Obi-Wan says. Not the doctrine wholesale. I'm not dismantling 10,000 years in an afternoon. But the part that tells a 22-year-old that love is a thing to be feared and hidden, that part we revise. Starting with the curriculum and working outward from there, he holds Yoda's gaze. Agreed? The oldest living member of the Jedi Order sits with this for a long moment. Agreed, Yoda says. Much to discuss we have. Yes, Obi-Wan says. We do. Anakin finds him at a table in the corner of a small restaurant, 3 blocks from the Senate building that Obi-Wan has been visiting for 20 years without ever telling anyone about it. The food is unremarkable, and the lighting is good, and the tables are far enough apart that a conversation can be private, which is all he has ever required of a restaurant. Anakin sits down across from him and steals a piece of bread from the basket without asking, which is so completely and entirely Anakin that Obi-Wan feels something in his chest that takes a moment to identify. It is simple happiness, uncomplicated and present, the kind that doesn't announce itself. Council session went long, Anakin says. They had questions. How many? Many. Anakin chews the bread. He is in civilian clothes, dark, simple, the clothes of a person who is not currently performing any particular role. He looks, without the Jedi robes, exactly like what he is, a young man who has come through something enormous and is sitting in a restaurant in the evening on the other side of it. I'm leaving the Order, he says, not as a confession, as information, delivered in the tone of something already decided. Formally, Padme and I talked about it. She's not going to pretend anymore, and neither am I, and the Council supports it. Obi-Wan says. Unanimously, I may have framed the conversation before the session. Anakin looks at him. You're going to be a father. The Order should say so openly and wish you well, and that is precisely what it is going to do. Obi-Wan picks up his glass. Unless you want to fight about it. Anakin looks at him for another moment. The expression on his face moves through something complicated and arrives somewhere that does not have a name, but does not need one. No, he says. I don't want to fight about it. They eat. The restaurant makes its quiet sounds around them. Outside, Coruscant hums at its usual frequency, the city that does not sleep and does not stop, carrying on with its enormous ordinary life now that the thing hidden at its center has been removed. They talk, not about the Council, not about the trial, not about the operational debrief that will occupy most of the next month. About Padme and what she said when she heard. About names, because Anakin has thoughts about names and is clearly waiting to be asked. About what a former Jedi does, practically with his particular skill set, and whether the Senate's security infrastructure has sufficient openings for a man who can stop blaster fire with his hand. Obi-Wan listens. He asks questions. He refills Anakin's glass when it empties. It is the most ordinary evening he has spent in either of his lifetimes. The house sits above the water in the way that Naboo houses do, built outward from the hillside rather than into it. The lake visible from every room that faces west. The afternoon light coming off the water in the long, flat gold of late summer. Obi-Wan sits on the terrace. In his arms, wrapped in the specific compact density of very new humans, are two children. Luke on the left, Leia on the right. Both asleep, both indifferent to the significance of the afternoon, both possessed of the absolute moral authority of the newly arrived. Padme is inside, resting, which Anakin had said she would do, and which required approximately 40 minutes of gentle negotiation to achieve. Anakin is somewhere in the house doing something domestic, which Obi-Wan can hear, but cannot see, and which sounds like someone who is exactly where he is supposed to be. The lake moves. The light moves with it. Obi-Wan looks at Luke. Luke Skywalker, who in another life grew up on a moisture farm with the weight of a lost father pressing into every year of his childhood, who learned the Force from a desert hermit, who loved him from a distance, because distance was the only safe form the love could take, who stood in a Death Star corridor and watched an old man lower his blade and smile, who carried all of it without knowing any of it, because the people who should have told him could not find a way to do it. Luke, who is 11 days old and asleep in Obi-Wan's arms on a terrace above a Naboo lake, with both his parents alive and in the next room. The sealed door in Obi-Wan's chest, the one he has carried since the Room of 1,000 Fountains, since the desert, since the Death Star corridor, opens, not with force, not with grief. It simply opens, the way a window opens when the room no longer needs to hold the weather out, and what moves through it is not pain but air. He breathes. The boy in his arms does not wake. Good, Obi-Wan thinks. Rest. You have time. For the first time in either of his lives, this is simply true. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.